Welcome to the Weekly Roar, coming live from the Lion's Den, helping new managers become great leaders and awesome bosses. And now, here's your host, Greg Storch.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Lion's Den. This is the Weekly Roar. Today, we're jumping back into my latest leadership series, How to Raise a Leader. And I want to talk to you about something that leaders need to be doing every day to help their potential leaders get ready to lead. You'll find out what that is in just a second. But first, I'm Greg Storch. I'm the founder of Lion Enterprise, a leadership development and coaching business where I focus on creating winning work cultures, one leader at a time. I'm a certified professional leadership coach and a certified leadership speaker and trainer. So last week, as you know, it was such an awesome week for me. I celebrated my 100th episode of the Weekly Roar. And I celebrated it by hosting a panel discussion on none other than consistency. I was joined by Eric G. Reed, Melanie Ake, Dennis LaRue, Renee Michelle, Paul Silva, and David McGlennon. We spent almost 2 hours speaking into consistency, and I'm telling you, if you missed it, they did not disappoint. I want to thank all of you who were in the room that day to watch that panel discussion. It was amazing. The entire day was amazing, and it's one I won't soon forget. Hey, listen, if you weren't able to join us last Wednesday, no problem. Just head over to my website at lion-enterprise.com and click on the Lion's Pride Library, where you're going to find video number 100 for last week. Hey, and while you're in the Lion's Pride Library, check it out. It's a free resource, and it's a great way for you to get more of the roar. All right. It is time to get back on track with this leadership series and kick off episode number 101 as I start my climb to my next 100 episodes. Over the past few weeks in this series, I've talked to you about how to find potential leaders, how to attract them by creating the right culture, and how to cultivate them once you bring them alongside you. Once you've established a trust relationship by carefully nurturing tomorrow's leaders, it's time to start focusing more on preparing them to lead. That's why today's episode is called Preparing a Leader to Lead. Pretty simple, right? Preparing tomorrow's leaders to be ready to lead is an ongoing process. It's not something that we're going to get done in a day or a week or even a month. You can't just sit them down and have them watch a bunch of leadership videos from YouTube. It's much more important than that. So much more. Leaders who have engaged in this process understand what it takes to prepare their future leaders. They know they're responsible for sharing the vision and giving those new leaders the tools they'll need to be successful. They also know that in the beginning, they're going to have to help that new leader along the way until he or she can get their feet under them. So in that vein, the right leader to prepare new leaders is one who, first of all, models the desired behavior. They do the job correctly and consistently. What? There's my favorite word. That leader is also going to serve as a great mentor or as an advisor. This is an important role because as the leader, they should not only have the vision of the organization, but they have to be able to communicate that vision clearly. And like any good mentor, they have proven past performance to reference while they're doing the mentoring. And maybe most importantly, that leader, well, they need to be able to empower tomorrow's leaders by fostering the new leader's potential and ability to lead. In this capacity, the leader will not only lead, but teach, assess, and reassess the progress of their potential leaders. This is why it's a process and not a series of training sessions and then they're done and ready to hit the streets leading. It just doesn't work like that. And that's why I'm sharing this with you today. Now, once a leader has found their potential leaders and they're ready to start preparing them to lead, then the process is ready to begin. So the first thing you're going to want to do is work on your relationship with the potential leader. Good personal relationships make for good mentoring relationships. Developing a personal relationship helps the potential leader to get to know you and hopefully like you. So they'll be more inclined to follow your direction and learn from you. If you haven't heard me speak on connecting with others, this is a great way to start building relationships with people. Ask them questions about their life. Where are they from? Where did they go to school? How many siblings do they have? Are they married? Do they have any children? Be genuine. You don't want to be doing this just because you're trying to get them to like you, so they'll listen to what you're telling them. Showing a genuine interest in your potential leaders, it's going to mean a lot to them, and it will help you learn more about their strengths and their weaknesses too. Another good conversation to engage in is about their dreams and their goals. Find out what motivates them. You can use that information to better align them in their strength areas to ensure their success as a new leader. One of the best ways to get to know someone on a more personal level is definitely get them away from the office setting. Take them out, take them to lunch, take them out to dinner. It helps to take their guard down when you can get them out of that environment. When I was a newly commissioned naval officer stationed with the Marines at Camp Pendleton out in California, the commanding officer of the medical battalion where I was assigned held tons of functions after hours and away from the battalion with all of his junior officers. Sometimes we'd all converge on a local pizza joint, and other times we'd just be invited over to his house for a big barbecue. I remember these visits like it was yesterday, and I still see him making his way around the party, stopping and talking with all the junior officers, all of the new leaders in his battalion. And he was getting to know all of us on a more personal basis. I remember the conversations I had with him. He asked me about where I was from and what my passions were and what I liked doing. Now, I'll admit, it was a little awkward at first, or maybe I should say it was intimidating, because this guy had been serving since the Vietnam War, and most of us had just been commissioned in the past 2 or 3 years. We're babies compared to this guy, and he outranked us by like 5 ranks. But what came out of that was a more personal relationship with him that allowed him to understand our strengths and weaknesses. He understood our goals and our desires, and he used that information for making assignments within the battalion where it was beneficial for us as junior officers. Now, eventually, you're going to have to get their commitment. Yes, a commitment from the new leader. Commitment is the one quality that enables a potential leader to become a successful one. No commitment, no success. I've heard leaders before asking their managers, hey, are you interested in doing X or interested in helping out with Y? What would be better to ask is for their commitment to it. There's a difference between having an interest in something and actually committing to it. If somebody's only interested in doing something, then they'll only do it if it's convenient for them. But if they are committed to doing it, then nothing will get in their way of accomplishing what they set out to do. If you want to make sure potential leaders will be committed, make sure you share everything about what's going on, what it's going to take to be successful in their new role, and don't sugarcoat it. They have to understand what it's going to cost them to lead. Once they fully understand what's at stake, they'll know what they're being asked to commit to, and you need to get that commitment from them. Listen, good leaders do not waste their time on people who are only interested. They invest their time in those who are willing to commit. If they aren't willing to commit after knowing what's being asked of them, I suggest you stop the process here and focus on those who are ready to actually commit. The next thing I want to mention is the importance of setting growth goals for potential leaders too. Goals are going to help set clear objectives and help that new leader get on the road to success. Just one goal, one step at a time. If we want to set our leaders up for success, we must introduce them to goal setting and, more importantly, goal achieving. Working together with a potential leader to set goals can provide a kind of roadmap that they can use to follow, which will result in their growth. Some of the greatest achievers in life are people who set goals for themselves and work hard to achieve them. Now, today's topic really isn't intended to teach you how to set goals. I'm not going to talk about SMART goals or anything like that, but real quick, I did want to share this goal setting tool that I learned when I was going through my professional coaching certification course. This is something that we added on top of the SMART format, and we called it AIM SMART. You probably already know about SMART goals and what SMART stands for, so I'm just going to talk about the AIM piece. Now, when I add the AIM piece in goal setting, it helps me identify the right goal and then develop the action plan to achieve them. I think of it as aiming to set realistic goals. Okay, so let me share what AIM is all about. So the A in AIM stands for acceptable. What is the minimum you can reasonably expect to accomplish? The I stands for ideal. What is the maximum you could accomplish? So the first two letters establish your boundaries, your minimum and your maximum. The M stands for middle. What is in the middle? And that is what I call a realistic stretch goal. So getting to the M helps you hone in and really identify a real goal that's a stretch but not unachievable. And once you go through that, then you apply the SMART process to that new realistic stretch goal. You see, goals have to be achievable, but if they don't require a stretch, if they're too easy, then growth won't result from achieving the goal. So once you have the goal identified, make sure it gets put into writing, and that will help you foster accountability for that goal. And the last thing I want to say about the whole goal part is to encourage potential leaders to review their goals and their progress on a regular basis. Okay, now this next step, this fourth thing in the process to prepare potential leaders to lead might seem a little obvious, but I'm telling you, you'd be surprised how often this step is overlooked or completely dismissed, and it's actually very, very important to the success of the new leader. Leaders must share their expectations with their potential leaders and provide them with the fundamentals of the position that they'll be expected to act in. Of course, one of the easiest ways to do that is to provide them with a copy of the position description. I don't know about you, but I've had to write my fair share of PDs because they didn't even exist. Seemed like that's all I did when I was on that contract in Washington, D.C. The customer required a PD for every single position, and I had 165 spots. When people understand the requirements and our expectations, they become a lot more productive. Without it, they can tend to just take on everything that comes across their plate, whether it's their responsibility or not. When I first started working for that IT company in Virginia, I had to develop an annual review process for my employees. The process that they had in place at the time only required that I perform an annual review once a year. I mean, that's typical, but it makes no sense to me at all. What if an employee wasn't performing well or meeting expectations, and I waited until review time to tell them what a terrible job they did? It's not the way to manage someone's success. That's a method to manage their failure. And what if they were doing a great job? I'm going to wait an entire year to give them some praise on good performance? There's got to be a better feedback loop, a progress check. So what I did was I implemented a process where within the first 2 weeks of hiring an employee, myself or the direct reporting supervisor would go through their position description with them. Then we'd sit down side by side and page by page, and we'd give them a copy of it. And during that conversation, as we walk through the bullets, and you've all probably seen bullets in PDs, they're not very detailed, they're almost generic. So when it would say something, we would stop and say, what this means to me, or my expectation of acceptable performance for this is, and we'd explain that to the employee. Doing that gave the employee a great picture of what was expected of them in their job, and almost as important, what wasn't expected, what was outside of the scope of their responsibilities. That kept them informed and productive. Now, the second thing I did was to implement a mid-year review. Using the annual review form, all managers on my contract would conduct one-on-one meetings with all of their employees. During those meetings, the supervisors would rate their employees' performance to date, and then they would tell the employees where they were excelling and discuss any areas in which they needed to improve. This gave the employee a fighting chance to correct any deficiencies in their performance and to meet expectations by the time it was time to do their actual annual appraisal at the end of the year. Yes, it was a lot of administration to handle for a lot of people, but it was the right thing to do for them. They were able to clearly understand the requirements of their positions, my expectations, and ultimately perform successfully because of it. Okay, the fifth and final step in this process is something that's very familiar to me from my military career. So once we have gone through all of the previous steps, it's time to turn our new leaders loose. But before you do, here's some information for you to consider. You can't just set your new leaders loose without giving them some structure, or it's going to be mayhem. But at the same time, leaders need to be a little flexible so they can encourage the new leaders' creativity. So you don't want to paint them into a restrictive box that doesn't encourage them to think on their own. But you also don't want them going off half-cocked either, right? So you're probably asking, how do you achieve a balance between those things? How do you strike the right amount of tension? Well, that's where my military days come in. There's three words that I became very accustomed to hearing when I was in the Navy. You want to know what they are? Of course you do. Responsibility, authority, and accountability. So I want to start with responsibility. Simple enough, right? Responsibility is the easiest of these three things for us to give. We all have responsibilities, and the one quality that all successful people have in common is the ability to take responsibility. Most of us have some level of responsibility in our work, meaning we're tasked with certain jobs assigned by an authority figure and are expected to complete them. Responsibility shadows us throughout our entire life, both in the office and at home. Here, I'm responsible for paying our bills. When the bills are paid on time, I've successfully completed my responsibilities. If they don't get paid on time, well, then I've failed in my responsibilities. When it comes to leading others, though, sometimes it can be challenging to allow others to keep the responsibility once it's been given to them. You're responsible to do this. Because, see, some leaders, poor ones in my opinion, they try to control every detail of their people's jobs, right? That just leads to their frustration by the person who's supposed to be responsible for the work. And it can also hold them back from growing and developing. If you make someone responsible to do something or for something, let them do it. Because when you do it, you've become responsible for it, and you stifle their growth. The next word typically follows responsibility, and that's authority. They have to be given together. That makes sense, right? When a leader makes someone responsible for something and then gives them the authority to do it, the person becomes empowered. But when it comes to delegating authority to new leaders, they're actually being given permission to have authority, not being given authority itself. Does that make sense? Let's say it again. They're actually being given permission to have authority, not being given authority itself. Why did I make that distinction? Because authority is earned, not something we can give. So the most important thing we can do as leaders for our new leaders is to give them permission to develop their authority. Then they must take responsibility for earning it. Now, that last word was accountability. Once a new leader has been given responsibility and authority, they're now empowered to make things happen. And this is where accountability comes into play. Real responsibility on the part of a new leader includes a willingness to be held accountable. Part of being accountable is the ability to admit mistakes and see them as all part of a learning process. And we need to ensure we create the right environment where our new leaders are not going to be fearful of being held accountable for their responsibilities. When I was in the Navy, there was this administrative action called frocking. That was a way to recognize sailors' advancement to a new rank prior to it actually taking effect, prior to actually receiving the promotion, which was the pay and the benefits with that new rank. So every time I got promoted to another pay grade, while I had to wait several months for the pay and benefits to kick in, frocking allowed me to assume the title and wear the uniform of my new higher pay grade. See, the reason I'm telling you this is because at the frocking ceremony, we were issued this letter that in part said, quote, "Your appointment carries with it the obligation that you exercise increased authority and willingly accept greater responsibility. Occupying now a position of greater authority, you must strive with a renewed dedication toward the valued ideal of service with honor." End quote. So that's a great example of these three words I was talking about before. Even though I wasn't receiving the pay and benefits until much later, the leader in charge was able to delegate authority to me because of my selection for promotion. And in that new rank, I had more responsibilities. And at the same time, accepting the delegated authority, I was also held accountable when I failed to properly execute my duties. Okay, let me quickly recap those 5 steps that I just shared with you today that are designed to help you prepare potential leaders to lead. First, focus on relationship building. Get to know your new leaders on a personal level, and that will help you understand their desires, strengths, and weaknesses. Second, get buy-in. A leader has to get commitment because without it, they will not achieve success. If the new leader's not willing to commit, abandon that effort and start working with those who are committed. The third thing was setting goals for growth with the new leader. Goals help set clear objectives and help new leaders get on the road to success. If we want to set our new leaders up for success, we have to spend the time introducing them to goal setting and goal achieving. Now, the fourth thing was set expectations. Our new leaders need to know what's expected of them so they have a fair chance to meet the expectations that we've set for them. And don't forget to share a copy of their PD with them. Okay, and then the final step, the fifth step, was to let them loose, but strike a balance. This is where responsibility, authority, and accountability all play a role in our ability as leaders to strike that balance between being too controlling, where we stifle creativity, and not controlling enough. These 3 things will help us create that structure that our new leaders need to work within so they can be successful at leading others. Okay, everyone, there you have it. That is the 5th episode in my new series, How to Raise a Leader. Next week, I'm going to talk about a lifelong commitment that will make the difference between being a good leader and a great one. If you want to hear more about what that is, then just come on back to the Lion's Den next Wednesday for the weekly Roar, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Thanks everybody for supporting me and watching the weekly Roar today. I appreciate you so much. And until we meet again next Wednesday, remember, be powerful, but stay poised just like a lion. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching the Weekly Roar live event at lionenterprise.com. If you enjoyed this video, please tell others to join us each week here in the Lion's Den. Thanks again, and see you next week.